help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound.
Here we go, everyone. Welcome back to What's the Rush podcast. And today we get to spend time with one of my favorite all-time humans in the entire world. Corey Rich and I have known each other 25 years. We actually were going down memory lane and to our first meeting that we'll talk about in the adventure racing world. And I tell you, it's been really fun to research one of my dearest friends, and he's been a peer and a mentor. He's a photographer and filmmaker and storyteller, and he's an adventure storyteller. He's one of the first visual storytellers I know who called himself a storyteller, first of all, before it was cool to call yourself a storyteller. I'm like, wait, you're a photographer. But he's called himself a storyteller for a long time. And the reason is he fully is immersing himself. He's a fellow dirtbag climber. That's how we bonded, basically. And I think still a dirtbag at heart, even though he owns a home and has a family. Um, but he spent his whole life basically documenting humans in their most daring and vulnerable moments, whether it's in sport, where he started. And like I said, he's on the wall, he's in the field, he's on the bike with the people that he's documenting and really capturing the essence of this scene, but really the person. And I think that's something that has always inspired me about Corey. He's doing a lot more than pushing a camera shutter button. He's really with you there, sweating and feeling the emotion and being a teammate more than somebody on the periphery. His book, The Story Behind the Images, is really a cool example of that, where he takes people beyond what you visually see, the visual experience, and takes you into more of a cerebral and soulful experience by describing what was going on that day, the person that he was shooting, the intimate relationship that he has with the landscape and the person. And I'm honored to be a page in the book. It's a really cool book, but it kind of showcases that Corey is a lot more, that he is a storyteller, and that he's part of the landscapes and the people that he's working with. And that's exactly what the concept of this podcast, What's the Rush, is about. We look beyond what's right in front of you and into the depths to uncover a deeper story. So Corey's a perfect person to tell some really fun stories with me, maybe some that he even hasn't told. Um, and we'll go back in time a little bit, but his life has been built around travel, adventure, telling stories with his camera, and he works on climbing walls in boardrooms. He's building community parks and camps for kids, and in everything he touches, Corey's so committed to creating meaningful work, not just really not for himself, but for everyone else around him. And he's moved from that one person show, rock climbing with a camera, to one of the best visual storytellers in the world, working with Fortune 100 companies, high production value commercial work. He's part of his own production team. And he's literally, like I said, hanging off the cliff of places like El Cap, capturing some of the most magical places that not everybody can go. He's also a dad, a husband, a fierce advocate for public lands and open spaces, and also now a generous teacher who's really helping shape the next generation of outdoor adventurers and storytellers. One of my besties in the whole world. Welcome to What's the Rush, Corey Rich.
Thanks, Reba. That was quite the poetic intro. Now I just need to live up to it and say something meaningful in this.
Yeah, I think you will. We were talking ahead of time about various podcasts. We won't mention any names. Michael Gervais, where you forgot to push record. Um, I had so much. Well, Michael was set this tone. If you haven't listened to episode 1, I encourage everyone to go back. Michael Gervais set kind of this psychology tone around What's the Rush. So I went back in studying my friend and listened to that episode, and it was really great. And it just kind of reinforced. I took like 2 pages of notes, but then you shared with me before we hit record that you had to do 2 takes because even Michael Gervais sometimes forgets to hit record. But I'm checking here; the recording's running, so we are good to go.
And
Um,
in Michael's defense, I think it was his intern, but
okay.
I
It
can't
wasn't.
remember that detail. Maybe it was. I don't know. I don't know.
Still, nobody's perfect, and I mean,
That's
I
right.
think that that's a good place to start, because we, get all these accolades, Emmy awards, nominated, this, that, and sometimes, I think we think that people are what they look like on social media, and instead of remembering that there's a human in there behind every high achievement and everything we've done. And that is why I launched this podcast, just to kind of give a little insight to someone who's new. Was the most recent 3-year concussion recovery journey for me, like, stopped me in my tracks, and I hid it from people. I didn't really tell people for about a year or more that I was really struggling. And once I did and opened up about it, people really resonated with kind of knowing the hard stuff. And so that's a little bit of what we talk about here. Um, but I want to go first to 25 years ago, when we met. I knew who you were because I was a rock climber. You were a rock climber. We both came from those dirtbag days. But you talk about when we met in your book, Stories Behind the Images, and I went back and read it this morning, and it was really cool. Do you remember that meeting in Borneo in 2020 and during adventure racing times?
I do. You know what I remember, Reba, is like, even as you talk about just that tee up that you gave and sort of the psychology and the motivation behind this podcast. I do remember going to Borneo, and this is a little bit of a backstory on me. Gosh, I was a kid in college. I couldn't have been 20 years old. Well, I would have been like, I guess if that math is right, I was 25 years old,
Yeah.
so a little older than I'm remembering. But I just remember going, and it was, I was working for quokkasports.com, and I was way out over the tips of my skis. Like, I didn't, I was convinced they made a mistake that they hired me. Like, of all of the incredible adventure photographers, like, why I was in Borneo getting paid to be there for 30 days or 20 days to shoot live streaming to the web on digital cameras was like beyond me. And I was totally there faking it. Like, I mean, I wasn't even confident I could shoot compelling photographs at that time. How I got myself into this situation where they were paying me like good money. I was on this like rad adventure, but I was surrounded by all of these elite endurance athletes, adventure racers. And I do remember that relief when I met you and I knew that you were a climber and we had like some mutual friends. There was this sense of like, okay, I can relate to one person in this room of like 600 people. And and I really vividly remember that. I mean, I kind of, even amongst my colleagues that were there shooting it for the media or the other folks for Quokka Sports, I just felt like, wow, they totally thought they were hiring someone else, but they got me. And
Yeah.
now I just need to kind of live up to it. Like, now I've just got to like deliver what they're asking for. And so, yeah, no, I actually vividly remember that, like that, just that kind of break from there was all of this unknown, these endurance athletes that I couldn't relate to. There was sort of this production crew and web development crew, and it was Eco Challenge, right? And Mark Burnett was there with, he
Yeah.
was like super committed to Eco Challenge and like Hollywood, and then there was like me, and meeting you was so beneficial because it's, we could talk about that, number two Camelot and like how your hand fits into the crack. And that was just really comforting.
It's so funny because I also felt out of my element. It was a really interesting time where and for people who don't remember adventure racing, and Eco Challenge, they were these huge international expeditions, multi-day, going all day, all night. You're traveling in teams of 4, co-ed teams of 4. And Mark Burnett, who was the founder of Survivor and a bunch of other stuff after that, this was his first really big TV thing. And he wanted to basically bring TV into the jungle, into the wilderness. And when you came in, early days of like streaming and video, and it was a really big audacious goal for him to document athletes who are not going to like do another take. We're moving through the course, navigating, sleep deprived, we're pissed off, we're lost, and you're trying
Yeah.
to find, the photographers had to find the people in the jungle. And
Right.
you had to be in the jungle with the like foot rot and nothing to eat and getting lost yourself. It was really an audacious goal, but it was also, I didn't fit in with those film people either. And I felt like it was this weird combination of like sort of shiny triathlete people, film people who didn't get, I thought were not going to survive
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
there. I'm like, they're going to die, and then there were like this, um, what I would say, I'm using air quotes here, and I don't even want to say, there were then the outdoor athletes who
Yeah.
were comfortable in the wilderness, comfortable sleeping in a sleeping bag, using a map and paper map and compass. Like
Yeah.
that's who I was, that's who you were. And so I also was like, who are these people? But then they hired you because they knew you would survive.
Yeah.
Basically, they didn't know how your work was going to turn out because you're so young, but they knew you wouldn't die in the jungle and they wouldn't have to rescue you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think, I mean, it actually, even hearing you say the same thing, it was just a lot. It was overwhelming, that experience. But I do look at that event. I mean, that I went to the Sahara Desert first for Quokka Sports to shoot the Marathon des Sables,
Oh yeah.
and then Quokka Sports got like another round of funding, and I ended up in Malaysia. I think I was still working for Quokka during the Malaysia Eco Challenge, and then eventually it led to working directly for Mark on projects. And I think you and I both, Reba, like, we lived up to it. You were an incredible athlete in Malaysia, and I delivered pictures and didn't die.
Yeah.
Like, didn't sucked it up. Though I will say that's the hardest environment for me, like hot and sweaty.
Jungle.
It's
Ugh.
just, it's like it left an imprint on me. I often get calls to go on, like, tropical jungle style trips, and I have to like pause because it's hard. That is a super difficult environment to live in.
It's, yeah, on the body, on the equipment, like it's
Yeah.
just everything's wet. Yeah, it is really hard. But I'm glad you were there. I'm glad we met. And I mean, since then I was actually going back through kind of our history together. I've done more work with you than any photographer or videographer in the world. Like I
Yeah.
was like, oh wow, we did work on Eco Challenge. I saw you in multiple races, and then your video Why, which was
Yeah.
actually really cool. You invited me to be part of this cool video about why extreme athletes do what they do, and it was Dane Jackson and me and who was the
And Alex Honnold. Yeah.
Alex Honnold. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
I was sort of like, kind of like you were in Borneo. I'm like, why did he invite me? Like Dane Jackson, Alex Honnold, and me? Like, why did you invite me? And it was about why do we push? What is the motivation? And I think that was where I first really, I knew you from adventure racing, but that's where I kind of saw the soul of that.
Hmm.
You wanted to do more than take a pretty picture.
Yeah. 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 I've always been attracted to, to making meaningful, authentic pictures. Like that word authenticity, photojournalistic, authentic imagery. I think when I was a kid, even, early teens, like, 15, 16 years old, I kind of realized that the pictures that really moved you were the ones that were very real. And I think, we saw that in coverage of war. We saw that in coverage of kind of humanity in newspapers. And I think I grew up working at a newspaper in the Antelope Valley, at the Antelope Valley Press. And sadly, we're losing this kind of journalistic ethic. We're just losing journalism.
Yeah.
There's just not the funding, and folks are finding their information on social media. But I grew up in the newspaper era, and so I was surrounded by photojournalists, and it was ingrained in me that pictures had to be real, and that it's about being there. It's like capturing that one decisive moment that in a single image really communicates feeling, and it communicates a story, and it communicates an emotion and a reaction from the viewer. And I guess I just didn't know any different as I began to apply photography to adventure sports. I just assumed that's how I had to photograph adventure sports as well. And I do think it was at a special time in adventure sports
Yeah.
storytelling where, it
Virtual.
wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, literally wasn't. That's not what was happening. Like there
Right.
were some few and far between. There were sort of photojournalistic moments in the adventure world,
What made
and
you bring your, because it's like you started, it's a cool story, but like different teachers when you were 13 or super young. One introduced you to photography, one introduced you to climbing, and then you somehow merged those two things. Was it like, did you realize that the most intimate moments were happening in sport because they were happening for you? And then like, how did you make that connection between those two things to basically be one of the first adventure
yeah. Well,
sports?
I don't think it was conscious. I think it was super subconscious. I think every kid can relate to this, or young adult. Maybe we can still relate to this, which is you just do what you love, right? Like if you like something and it's positive, and that feedback loop it's a positive feedback loop, you just do more of it.
Yeah.
And I loved climbing, so I climbed as much as I could. I loved taking pictures, so I shot as many photos as I possibly could. And then it became really obvious that, like, well, the two things that I love the most are, climbing, being an outdoor adventure dirtbag, and taking photos. And like that was an obvious, like, how can I make these two things overlap? But I think I think there was some luck in this, Reba, which is I kind of found climbing, I found photography and a certain style of photography at a moment in time where it turned out there was this, founder of a clothing company called Patagonia, Yvon Chouinard, had like declared to his staff around that same time, maybe a decade earlier. He realized we need to like what's going to make this brand unique is we're going to use authentic pictures of real people doing real shit outdoors.
Mm.
And I didn't get that memo. No one told me like that's what Yvon Chouinard said to his team. But here comes this kid, Corey Rich, and like I love climbing and shooting real pictures of real people having adventures. And those two worlds collided at like just the right time,
That's
where
cool.
all of a sudden there was this brand, pretty reputable brand that cares about the right things, has kind of the moral compass that's pointing north, and environmental compass that's pointing north. And thankfully I found them, they found me, and it totally like paved the way, like created this
Yeah.
runway to wow, this I can like make money doing the two things that I love doing most.
Did
And
you think it was just going to be like this, maybe this quick side job in your 20s, and then you'd have to get a real job later?
I
Or,
wish I could tell you that like I had that much sort of aptitude and
yeah,
foresight that I was even thinking about that.
yeah,
But it's hard. For at least for me in my 20s, I wasn't really thinking about sort of what am I going to do in my 30s or
yeah.
40s.
No
And
10-year plan or like,
yeah, I mean,
I never had that. I
there was
still,
no business plan. Yeah, I still don't have a business plan. Yeah, I still don't have a college degree or a business plan.
hey, I love it. So I saw something that you, if we go back to like you really wanting to move people through your images, I read something that your mom is basically your litmus test
Yeah, yeah,
of like, which I kind of love. I just lost my mom recently, and you probably met her in Borneo because she was there. She was at like all my races, my biggest fan. And so I was kind of touched by the fact that your mom's your litmus test, but that she, she's not going to sugarcoat it. Like if she doesn't like something,
yeah,
gonna be
yeah,
honest with you.
yeah. And I think it's it's my mom in my life she's symbolic of something, which is we see billions of photos in our lifetime, visuals, video, and still photography, and it's only occasionally we're moved by a picture or a video clip. It's pretty rare. Like honestly, it's I always say that I'll spend my entire career, 50 plus years, taking pictures and shooting films, and there will only be a few pictures in my entire career that really move the needle or affect people or are kind of the winners, right? It just takes enormous repetition to make those great frames. And I think I used to always show photos to my mom because it was, I think she can't hide anything. My mom, you could just read her face, and what would come out of her mouth was just so genuine. And the truth is, even with my mom, I could show her 1,000 pictures, but it's only one or two would like affect her. And she
Mm,
would, if a wow came out of her mouth. But it was a good test for the general public. It's,
mhm.
there's a lot of good pictures. There's a lot of mediocre pictures, fewer good pictures, and very few great pictures out there.
Yeah.
And it's, I've always felt like, my mom was never mean, but to get like real accolades out of my mother, real reaction, it
Yeah.
meant it was approaching a great picture, which didn't happen very often.
Yeah. And I mean, if we're talking about, internal and external validation, um, where does your motivation come from? I mean, obviously you're making a living, you're a working
Yeah,
artist, and so you need to have external validation. But it doesn't
yeah.
seem that's where it started. You were
No,
just
definitely. I mean, I was just thinking recently about, we grow up and sort of our, quote unquote business model, even though I don't have a business plan, changes, and like life realities change. And I wouldn't trade anything. Like I'm so happy to be where I am in life right now. But I do remember, 25, 30 years ago, sitting, living in my Honda Civic. I took out all the seats except like the driver's seat. I could sleep in my Honda Civic, and I had a notepad, and I was, shipping transparency film. I would go to a photo lab in the middle of, nowhere, United States, process the film, buy a FedEx envelope, ship it to Patagonia, Climbing Rock, and, all the magazines and catalogs. And then I kept tally in this notebook with like a pen, which images I sold and like the $300 I was going to make. And that was like my ledger of, I would occasionally add it up, like, okay, that's two $300 pages here, a $250 spot here, $1,000 cover. Okay, I can stay on the road for another 2 months.
where'd they
But
send checks? There was no like
I think it
Venmo.
was to my mom and dad. My mom and dad they were getting checks, or maybe it was to like a buddy's dorm room. I think it was my mom and dad. My mom was willing to go and cash my checks, and for 25 years she did the bookkeeping in my business until finally,
Oh,
no longer fit.
cool.
It was, I mean, it was beautiful, and like but it's, it evolved. I mean, I think you asked about the drive. It certainly was not I was doing it to make that, $300 page rate.
Mhm.
I was doing it because I think we all just need purpose. And I, God, it still is, it was then, and it still is. It was just so fulfilling to be outside
Yeah.
with people that I really respected. That was like always rule number one. I wanted to spend time around people that I enjoyed their friendship and
Mhm.
time together. And then also that I loved just being a participant. It's like I've always said that when I'm truly engaged, like sweating and scared, and part of the conversation with the athletes around like, should we go or should we not? What's that?
Yeah.
Is that ice going to fall on us? Is that rock too loose?
Yeah.
I think it's when I thrive. And so I think that's always been the driver. It's like it's the opportunity to spend time with amazing people, opportunity to be in incredible wild places. And then I think that added layer, which is the piece that allowed me to make a living doing it, is and occasionally make an incredible photo. Like, always come back with good stuff, but occasionally something really great. That's like a lifetime pursuit, that you're always chasing the great photos, but
Mhm.
you get hired to create good photos reliably.
There's so much I want to dive into with there. One, I just resonate. My mom she helped me early on in my business as well. And it wasn't even a business, but she would like help me write race reports before there were blogs or
Right.
before there was anything, before cell phones. And she would help me write basically like family Christmas cards, but they were like race reports. And we recently moved to a house, and I came across like all of these like she'd kept all of these reports and all of these things. And when we're out on the adventure races, people could email in a message to a team, and they would print it out and
Hmm.
have it at a checkpoint, like somewhere in the middle of wherever. Your team number 43 would get a like 5 pages of notes that that came in from your friends and family around the world. And so we'd take those pieces of paper, head out into the jungle or wherever, and then I would read them as we hiked in the middle of the night. I'd read them to our team, and like it was just another time. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
crazy. My mom was a big part of helping that with too. And like you, I didn't plan to be a professional athlete. I was just wanted to be outside and
Yeah.
stuff. And there happened to be a way that I could make a few bucks here and there. But at some point, what you love and what your vocation becomes, at least for me, becomes a burden and becomes real stressful and takes you away from the climbing and the riding and the things that you love. Have you experienced that kind of high level pressure? I mean, you work with some clients that are really demanding, and I know you don't sleep very much and you've got to like, are there points where you lost what you loved in some ways because it became your profession?
Yeah, I think two things come to mind there. One, I think that first question of did I ever lose the joy in being outside and being a storyteller because it was my profession? And I think the answer is no. I think the only time that I've truly kind of disliked my chosen occupation and felt like shit, I'd rather be like roofing a house right now than doing what I'm doing is when I ended up in situations where I was working with people that I just really didn't like. Where you
Yeah.
just, as I kind of peeled the layers back, I just realized like, wow, we're not seeing eye to eye. This, and it's rare, by the way. This didn't happen very often in my career, but that's pretty tough. I think I'm a pretty easygoing guy, but boy, when I'm around people that I don't respect,
Mm.
I just get like I don't want to say a shorter fuse. I just get really unhappy and the joy kind of evaporates. It's
Yeah.
all of a sudden I'm just trying to make it through. And that hasn't happened many times in my career, a few trips or a few situations where it's sort of, I was aligned with someone that I realized, wow, this will be the first and last project with this person where we kind of, and usually you both agree to kind of fire one another. Like,
Yeah.
that usually it's not just one directional. I think what I actually, you know, what I am still trying to wrap my head around, Reba, is, and maybe it's the getting older part. There was a moment in my life where my entire professional life and personal life was filled with adventure and adventure storytelling. And thankfully, my career evolved and I started not shooting exclusively adventure content, but storytelling in a kind of broader, more corporate advertising realm for bigger brands where they had more budget and they, more resources, frankly. And, now I'm almost 50. I'll turn 50 in December. Most of what I'm doing is not in the adventure world, and
Mm.
it's not hanging off of a cliff. And there's a little bit of FOMO around that. There's
Yeah.
definitely some like, I look at some of my friends that are still out there every day shooting adventure. They're athletes,
Mhm.
and there is a bit of a like, God, I'm. It's hard for me to not be getting on that airplane to fly to Alaska or to Argentina. But then I take a step back, and I'm so thankful that I also have had the opportunity to sort of transition from. That's hard. Like it's hard to actually be on that plane or on that expedition all the time. And I've had the opportunity to transition into, as you said, I own a house and I'm married and I have a daughter and I see my daughter a lot. And outdoor adventure and recreation, now it happens more on a daily basis for fun than for work. And
Yeah.
that's been like quite a change. It's not to say that I don't occasionally go and shoot an adventure project or hang off of a rope, um, but it's not the mainstay of my work. But
Yeah.
it's definitely something that I sometimes, there's so much of my identity and who I was and who I am is based on that. There's 30 years of my life that I was the adventure guy. I'm the adventure storyteller, and now it's a pretty low ratio of storytelling that I do, where my heart's beating at 160 and sweats in my eyes and I'm scared and I'm trying to keep up with athletes, and but I'm okay with that. I've made a bunch of life choices. I live in the mountains. And that's by design, because I still need that for my soul, being outside, having adventure. It's just I'm not getting paid as often to go out and document that adventure, and I'm thankful for that. But that's been something in the last decade, I think, that I've tried to kind of wrap my head around, that you know process that it's okay, and it's actually a choice.
Yeah.
And I think I feel super fortunate that this transition has happened.
I mean, yeah, we're on this parallel path, and I'm sitting here, there's every week I'm like, oh, I could plan another adventure, or I'll see something like or I, even when we were like getting ready to talk, I'm like, maybe Corey and I should go do another film project,
Yeah.
because I love it too. I love being out there for days on end with a bunch of people, and working really hard with a collective experience. And I mean, we've had so many of those cool experiences together, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
I miss it too, but then I'm also like, I also live immersed in nature. We moved a few years ago. Um, I've been in the Ketchum Sun Valley area for 20 plus years, and we moved 45 minutes outside of town because it was too busy. So we live, there's no cell phone coverage when I leave my house, and stuff like that. That's really special. But it was a life decision. But yeah, I'm a little bit teetering on that too. Like, I'm
Yeah.
grateful for what I had, but also not totally ready to let go of myself as an adventure athlete and say, I'm a podcaster now, like that's not all I want to do. And as you were talking, and I looked at, you just had a really cool trip, it looked like, with some mutual friends and some kids and your daughter Layla, and you took her rock climbing
Yeah.
and skiing. And I was just like, it's like you're getting micro doses basically of adventure every day. You've built your life around it. You even do your working calls on your bike. Sometimes we've had
Yeah.
calls while you're on your bike. So you're not letting go of it. It's just not such a deep, committing, all in experience right now.
Yeah. And I think part of it is also, in a wonderful way, it's age, right? When you and I were both in our 20s and 30s, you were at the peak of your athletic career, 30s, 40s. And I was in the peak of that storytelling, both my athletic career, but also as an athlete who could keep up, but also as a storyteller. And I think it's a natural evolution to sort of
Hmm.
grow out of being dependent on being that elite athlete or that elite storyteller in that environment. And you're right, like it's so sweet now, Reba, to go and have those adventures with my daughter or my wife or friends, and not feel the pressure that I just need to constantly be pitching the next project or the next story.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up is it helps to be surrounded by friends who are, turns out we all met one another at roughly the same time, and it turns out no one can age slower. We're all aging at the same pace. And it really helps to be surrounded by, a lot of those same athletes that I traveled the world, you included. We're all evolving, and we're all sort of moving on to that next stage in life. And, I'm thinking about Pablo Durana, who I think Pablo is one of the most talented adventure filmmakers today. He's the fittest, smartest, most talented, and he's in his prime right now. Like
Yeah.
Pablo and his wife just had a baby. They live here in South Lake, and he just left for Nepal for an Everest trip. And I'll admit, we went to dinner at their place, and on one hand, I'm sitting at the dinner table feeling like massive FOMO of like, oh, I want to go to Nepal. I want to do an Everest trip. But then sitting across the table from me is my 11-year-old daughter. And I know what it means to go to Everest. It's for 6 weeks or 8 weeks. It's like
Yeah.
you're gone for a lot. And then this whole conversation goes on in my head as I'm sitting there at the table with Pablo and his wife Karina, and I'm thinking, yeah, no, I mean, he's about to have this amazing trip, but no, I'm super thankful that I had that experience in life. But now I'm at that next phase where I have an 11-year-old girl, and we live in the mountains, and I get to have experiences with her, and I'm not dependent on on an expedition for paying my mortgage. And it's like a beautiful evolution and full circle. And in 10 years, Pablo is going to be having the same conversation with some young guy
Yeah.
or woman who's going on an expedition to Everest. And so I don't know. I'm pretty resolute. I still feel FOMO, but I'm so happy and so thankful that somehow we managed to turn this into a career and fool everyone that
Yeah.
we were working.
You work your ass off. You had, yeah, to fool everyone that you're working. I know you've really had your nose to the grindstone for decades.
Yeah,
Like you said, pitching and working for yourself and being an entrepreneur. You don't know when the next job is going to
yeah,
come,
yeah,
um, especially with marketing budgets and all that. I mean, yeah,
yeah.
you
It's true.
hard. We've had a lot of discussions about business discussions, and which is actually really cool. It's just even though you're your own business person, to have the community to talk to about it, and somebody to sort of say, "Yeah, I've been there too." It's super hard to pitch these stories and pitch these jobs.
Yeah, you and I have been sounding boards over the last 25 years on the
Mhm.
business side of adventure sports. And I think it's also important to remember the entire industry has really evolved
Yeah,
in the last 25 years. It's gotten so much bigger. I
yeah,
mean, I just kind of remember, 25 years ago when you and I met in Borneo, and then we did a bunch of work for Montrail, and
yeah.
sort of, the amount of money, like the idea of making a career in the adventure sports world 25 years ago, climbing world, uh, adventure racing world, there weren't many people doing it. Like there was definitely not like a track for here's how you do it.
No,
And that's changed quite a bit. I mean, like it is, the industry's got to be like 10x larger, and there's so many more people at various levels actually making a living in this industry. And so I felt like we were maybe the second generation.
yeah,
There were some folks that came before us, and we learned from that. We stood on their shoulders.
yeah.
And I think now there's, we're I hate to admit it, we're becoming like the older statesmen of
The
the.
elders, actually, I'm proud to be an elder.
Yeah,
It's sort of a term that, at least in Western culture, we
yeah,
don't celebrate our elders or the people that came before us in the way that other cultures do. And yeah, it's like Yvonne Schnard, Tom Frost, like Fred Becky, who you filmed, and all these people were the ones that we were reading about. And then, yeah, we're passing it on to others. But, there's the cool thing with storytelling and the work that you do and that we can capture these stories is that you can go back and relive them, and you have that book. I remember you sent me this really sweet video during COVID, because you couldn't go out and film, and you took your book, the stories behind the images, and you had your daughter. You basically read all the stories to her, and you filmed yourself like story time. Like it was the cutest thing ever. And I think you told me, you're like, yeah, her favorite story is yours. And
true.
like it makes me cry right now to even think that, yeah, maybe we're not in our prime of our my athletic career or whatever, like my competitive career, but like the fact that I could affect somebody in that way is like makes me so proud that you captured it, that she felt that way, and then that you shared that with me. Like what it was such a gift to imagine her saying that. Like it makes me cry. It's so sweet.
It's, I have to say, Reba, this morning, when I'm home, I eat breakfast with Marina and Layla every morning. And if I can, I drive her to school. And I always make a point of, I'm just a curious person, and I want to teach her that. Like, what are you doing today? Let me tell
Yeah.
you what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, we like recount any funny stories or highs and lows. And I told her this morning, I said, "Oh, guess what I'm doing today? I'm doing a podcast interview with Rebecca Rusch." And she lit up. Like she just totally lit up because she remembers when you came to town
Yeah.
to ride the lake trail, and you were in like your fancy Red Bull clothes and fancy bike, and she got to put on her helmet, and it was like a unicorn helmet with like ears sticking out of it, and she got to ride around the block with you. And
Yeah.
like that is seared in her brain that like, yeah. And I've heard her tell friends like, no, I mean, I've ridden bikes with Rebecca Rusch. You know, she just drops it like it's, you know,
Uh,
leaves out the part about around the block, but it's
well,
like that left an imprint. I mean, that you've left an imprint in her
well, maybe
brain.
that's our next adventure project. Maybe needs to bring her out to Idaho, and she can. I've always wanted to climb the Finger of Fate, which is like a
Oh,
five
that'd be so
summit
fun.
route out here. So maybe that would be
That'd be
something.
amazing.
Be really cool. Let's go. Can we go to the Kokopelli Trail story? Because
Sure.
that was a really impactful. That was my first like film project with Red Bull before Blood Road, before any of that stuff. And I asked you to come help me document the FKT attempt, and it was 2013. Um,
Okay. Wow.
yeah, 2013. We went to, Kokopelli Trail is 142 miles. I wanted to go try to break the record, and we got a teeny weeny film crew. I think it was you were early on. That was kind of some of your early days of getting into moving filmmaking,
That's
right?
right. Yeah, that's right. Was that pre Y? No, no, we had already shot
We had
Y.
shot Y, which I think was one of your first
Yeah, yeah,
undertakings, which was, yeah, why athletes do what they do. And then I
yeah,
asked you to come document the Kokopelli Trail, but the way that FKTs, which is fastest known time, um, and at the time nobody was doing those. Now that's like a thing.
yeah,
Um, but the rules of it are basically you are unsupported. No one can tell you where to go, no one can give you food or advice or even cheers or high fives. And I was really adamant with you all that like you can't talk to me.
right. That's
I don't
right.
want to see you. I don't want anyone to think that if I do break this record that it's not legit. And so you had a pretty hard task to be like, okay, we can't talk to her, we can't be seen, we can't help in any way, but yet we have to capture
Right.
this story. And I mean, I started at midnight, and I think the record was, I don't know, it was like 15 hours or something. I ended up breaking the record, breaking my finger, breaking my bike lights, like all this stuff went wrong. But ended up breaking the record. And then as soon as we finished, I passed out at the finish because I looked at my finger, which happened in the first few hours. I crashed and dislocated my finger. And when I took my glove off, it was an open dislocation. So you could see tendons and like tissue
Yeah.
and stuff like coming out of it. So that then I went to the emergency room. But you had a pretty hard undertaking, and I was really pretty aggressive about like, don't mess this up for me. Like capture it and make it beautiful,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
don't mess up the record attempt. Do you remember that?
But yeah, and I remember we were a tiny crew. You had really teed that up, you know, that set the expectation. And it was Dane Henry
Hmm.
and myself. And was it Sean Haverstock, I think?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Sean was just kind of new to flying drones. And yeah, a tiny crew. And Greg was with us, you know,
Hmm.
your now husband.
Yeah.
And I remember, I mean, in some ways, it's kind of what I and we are the best at, which is being documentarians,
Yeah.
sort of staying out of the way. You know, there was no repeating anything during. I remember embracing the idea that we weren't going to get a ton of coverage during the actual event,
Yeah.
but it was we were going to get what we can get, and you know, a lot of what we shot during the actual FKT it wasn't great content, but it was raw. It was very authentic and real. And then I think our plan was, you know, we had no idea that you would end up in the emergency room and with a, you know, broken finger. But I think we took a day or two off and then went out and like retraced some of it, like openly did some like recreations of the course.
Yeah, and
And
we were open about that. I remember sitting there and basically you were like, so we need to shoot tomorrow. Like,
that's
how's
right.
how's 6 a.m.? And I'm just physically blasted, emotionally blasted. I just come from the ER. They told me I couldn't eat any food until I got surgery on my finger. And so then that made me really mad because I couldn't eat. But we shot, and you were
Yeah.
so kind and like supportive about it. But you did make me do some takes.
I think, and I think that's for anyone that's listening that sort of is curious about sort of what makes Reba Reba. That's a quality that I've seen with you and other like really elite athletes is, that idea of setting the FKT, that's a given, right? That's about being like one of the best in the world at what you do. Then there's the next level of like the being the professional part, which is the next morning after you've set an FKT, passed out, went to the ER, had surgery, barely slept. You got up at 6 a.m. and we like filmed all day. And then we probably did it again.
Tapped my finger so that you couldn't tell that it was bandaged.
Yes.
It was like a whole like gaffer tape and all this, and try to hide this giant like
Yeah.
cast on my finger.
Because I think in our world, in the adventure sports world, half of making a living at being a professional athlete is actually being good at the sport. The other half is what you just described, Reba.
Yeah.
It's the like the running the business side. It's the being open to and willing to like dig super deep beyond just the athletic feat.
Yeah.
Because I think that was, you had a long decorated career with Red Bull. And it's, I think part of the reason that happened is because you delivered beyond just the athletic accomplishment. And I remember that. Like I remember you all the time.
For women in sport, you have to,
Yeah.
fortunately, you have to be the best, be a world champion. I remember my athlete manager, I was with Red Bull 22 years, which is a really long run, and in different sports. And my athlete manager, the last athlete manager I had, he was amazing. He said, he had a roster of, I don't know, like 15 or 20 athletes, about mixed male and female. All of his women, all of the women that he represented were world champions, Olympians, and like none of the men were,
Hmm.
and this is not to throw shade on any of the men, but the expectation is so much higher, and it still
Yeah.
is for women. And so I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, running the business part of it and evolving and changing as you've had to do is way harder than training and, strength training and going out and do your work and do what the coach says. Like that's the easy part. And right now there's a lot of athletes, calling themselves privateers. That's like a new word for
Hmm.
venture athletes who are basically making a living on their own and having to hustle their own contracts and things. It's now like called a
Oh,
privateer.
I haven't heard that. Oh, that's interesting.
And it's like people announcing, "Oh, I'm going privateer." It's like, and this is where I feel like sort of old and crusty. I'm like, yeah, well, that's like, like our parents used to say, I had to walk to school uphill both ways into the wind. Like it was really hard to pave the way. And I'm glad other athletes, like you said, so many other athletes are now making a living because of media and sort of digital resources, but also because other people came before, like you. I mean,
Yeah.
Pablo's maybe doing what he's doing because he saw you set the bar for it.
Well, I mean, and I think, I can only speak to the photography side, but, we've all stood on the shoulders of who have come before us. And I always point to Tom Frost as one of those guys that
Yeah.
he showed both climbers and photographers how it's done.
Yeah.
And, I'd put Chenard in the same place. Yvonne, built an incredible clothing brand and equipment company, but he also just has vision. Like he had vision for like, what are we going to do that's different than all of these other brands, and kind of where does our compass point? What's our moral compass? And I think, I learned so much from those guys, from Chenard, from Frost, from Becky and Galen Rowell and Greg Epperson, and I've and from school teachers and from athletes, from you, Reba. I mean, I've learned all kinds of insights from the athletes that I was working with. And now I mean, I want to believe, I don't know. I think Pablo's, his wings are spread and he's soaring, but
Yeah.
it's like, I think I love passing along
Mhm.
knowledge or insights or introductions. And I mean, I think I get like deep joy out of that.
You
I'm
want to
the
know what I've learned from you?
I'd love to hear it.
You have this like, I mean, basically you have this zen like quality to you all the time.
Hmm.
Like, I've never seen you lose your temper. I've never seen you get stressed or like throw anything down, or and you're in like really high stakes, really stressful situations. You know the athlete is at their limit, and you've always created this super sense of calm
Hmm.
around the scene, which is why I keep asking to work with you, and it's why I love working with you, because you actually have this sort of like super zen state about you where you're ready for anything, you know, but yet you're super calm. And
Hmm.
I don't know, I've never met anyone who has that kind of control. And it's something that I'm working on as I age. Like, I you know me, I'm very intense sometimes when I'm an athlete and
Yeah.
doing a thing or even working. I can be really intense. I can be short with people. I know this about myself. And but I've never seen that in you. And no matter how few hours of sleep you've gotten or how scary the situation or the rain that's coming down, like I'm thinking of our Arkansas film project. Oh my gosh. I've never seen you lose your shit. And you create this sense of calm and peace and readiness at the same time around the scene. And I don't know how you do it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I don't know. I think that comes from climbing, right? You just
Yeah.
the diciest situations. If you lose your shit, it usually gets worse. Like
Yeah.
versus if you can like calmly think about like, okay, we have to make a decision. What are we doing here?
Right.
And I don't know. I've always like I think it just happens subconsciously, but I've it's always like a really uncomfortable thing for me when someone else is losing it or yelling because I'm always thinking in my head, I don't know if this is helping right now.
I'm
Like this
sorry if
is
I'm sure you've been through. I've been doing that at times.
no, no, I don't think I've ever, never directed at me, but I'm not even sure. I'm not sure I've ever seen you really lose
Well,
your
you
shit.
bring, that's what I'm saying. You bring me to a calm level, which is really good as a teammate. Like,
Yeah. Well, thank you
yeah.
for that. Yeah.
So do you have to keep climbing so that you keep reinforcing this Zen like calm attitude about everything? Like when you're trying to close some huge deal or a client's yelling at you, do you go rock climbing so that you can reinforce that state of calm?
Maybe not just climbing, but I think it is go outside. I
Yeah.
think, that the medicine, which is be outside and, feel
Mhm.
the wind blowing in your face. And I mean, it sounds so cliche, but it's just so powerful, like time outside. If it's climbing, great. If it's riding a bike, if it's, walking on the beach, whatever that is, I I do find I do a lot of my like deep thinking and like problem solving when I'm outside. It's a lot harder to sit at a desk like in an office and
Yeah.
stare at a screen and be like, I'm going to solve this problem. But I learn what the problem is, and then I love to be outside and sort of, and oftentimes it has to be alone. It's like a lot of time walking uphill alone, kind of with lots of thoughts going through my brain and trying to like problem solve and run through scenarios. But yeah, it's pretty hard to imagine life without time outside, like
Yeah.
without some, and even a little bit of adventure. It doesn't always have to be like you're worried about, the slope avalanching on you, but it's just outside and a little uncomfortable. I think
Yeah.
leads to some of that great thought and like I've never met anyone that doesn't go out and have an adventure that
Mhm.
doesn't come back happier than when they started that adventure. Like, you're just a better version of yourself. I certainly am when
Yeah,
I
I
get
mean,
outside and move.
nature is super healing and a movement. I mean, it's not cliche. It's like ancient,
Yeah.
ancient wisdom that now science is actually proving that time outside, moving in nature is like the best magic pill for our health
Yeah.
that we can take. I know when I was sort of stopped doing anything really hard the past few years during concussion recovery, I was walking my dogs outside, and so I was outside, but to your point, I wasn't really pushing and I wasn't taking any risk. And I missed that. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't enough to just go stroll and walk the dogs. I mean, it's all I had the capacity for, but I can recognize now that I'm having the itch to do some bigger things or harder things that like I need a little bit of that adventure, and it doesn't
Yeah.
need to be huge, but it needs to be something a little unknown, something a little bit risky or hard or uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah, I can relate to that. I think there, and you're right. It's not just cliche. It's actually just we've learned this generation after generation. We need this as
Yeah.
humans, right? It's
What so in the arc of your career, were there times where was there any time where you were gonna throw in the towel and you're like, this is too hard on my family, I can't do it. I'm gonna go, like you said, paint houses or
yeah,
or work in I've had those thoughts of like
yeah.
worked a job where literally when I go home, I'm done
You're
with the job.
done. Yeah,
Like I've thought about that multiple times in my career, and I'm glad I pushed through and stayed on the sort of the creative path. But there have definitely been moments where I wanted to throw it all in.
yeah.
Do you have
I think that the two situations that come to mind for me are I think there have been super stressful moments where I'm just in over my head, overcommitted, worried about the outcome, where the stakes are really high, where it's sort
Mhm.
of like, if I fuck this up, this is going to be, we're going to lose this client. It's a lot of money on the line. It's like they're never going to come back. It's a huge part of, my income, our company's income. And it always turns out, and then I go for a 3 hour walk in the woods and I think about sort of the options and I'm, playing through the scenarios that could, go this way, plan A, plan B, plan C. These are the scenarios. And in those moments, I definitely dream of I'll drive by someone like up on the roof, putting tiles on a roof in like hot sun. And I think, God, that guy's life looks great right now. Like if
So,
I could just be, it's just super straightforward. Get on the roof, get the tiles on.
yeah.
And in those really stressful moments, I've had that thought, a couple of dozen times in my life.
Mm,
And but then I've always landed on no, I'm going to show up and just do the best freaking job I can. And you know what? It's out of my control. If I totally blow it and we lose this client or whatever the situation is, so be it. Like I've given it my best possible effort and I need to kind of let go and just focus on performance and
mm,
not worrying about all the what ifs and what could go wrong in the politics and it's knock on wood, that's always worked out. Like it is always like after lots of reflection and playing out scenarios, it turns out like the best thing you can possibly do for yourself is just show up and give it 110% and be honest with who you are. I'm the first to admit mistakes. When it's my mistake, I'm going to own it. Whatever that means to correct the mistake, I'll correct it. um, and then I think that another moment in life where I did kind of question, like, do I need to just throw in the towel? Was at that moment where Marina and I started talking about having a family, and I was still deep in like the adventure world, traveling a ton. A lot of it was high risk, and I did have this reflective moment where I thought to myself, "How's this going to work? Like, it having a kid is easy, right? That's a pretty simple deal. It's the like being a good parent and like being around and like being a dad and enjoying it, being a participant. And
yeah.
there was this kind of reflection point when we decided like we're going to do this. And it was kind of scary. I thought to myself, how's this going to work? Like if life doesn't change, we're going to have a kid, but I'm not going to be a great dad. I'm not going to be around. I'm not going to be a great spouse. And it was that I think it was just that openness and consciousness of I need to somehow pivot my energy. Like I can't be gone all the time. I can't be taking the same amount of risk. I just can't do the same hustle. It's got to transition. It's got to turn into like my focus needs to shift. And, I don't think it was I'm going to quit. I just remember thinking like I've got to figure out how to pivot. And,
Mm,
thankfully, a decade later, that pivot worked. And I wish I could tell you like Reba, I made a business plan and I said I'm going to do this and then this and this and but it was more just that positive directional thinking. It was I know what I want to achieve. I know the direction I want to go and I'm just going to make millions of tiny decisions that help move in that direction. And it truly is it's tons of decisions. It's sort of not going on. I mean, it's not just I'm not going on this trip, but I am committing to doing this other project. I'm going to put more time into courting this group of clientele and less time into courting this group of clientele. I'm going to start building a portfolio of work that speaks to a broader client base than the adventure world. But it's, that I think that's the closest I've ever come to really just questioning, how is this going to work? Like, what
Yeah.
does this look like long term?
I mean, it's such a good point that, like, sometimes these problems, and I mean, I can relate because I'm really shifting my business right too, from competitive athlete to other things, and sharing my wisdom in other ways and inspiring people in other ways. But and you try to look for, like, what's the big thing, but it really isn't big. It's your daily,
Yeah.
literally daily choices of saying no to stuff more than saying yes, quite
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it's no to things that you might have said yes to in the past and yes to things that you might have said no to in the past. Right. It's
Yeah.
almost like shifting the paradigm,
Yeah.
kind of refocusing
So
is,
did you consciously sit down and look at, like, okay, if I'm doing adventure photography, there's more travel, or if I'm, and it's a smaller bucket to pull from. Like, was it pretty logical like that? Or did it, now that you look back, you can see how it shaped, but
yeah.
then
I think there was the big, broad, logical decision that
yeah,
I need to be on fewer expeditions
yeah,
and I need to be doing more of these, kind of corporate commercial advertising projects for big
right,
companies,
right.
hopefully companies that I believe in and, care about their ethos. And so there was that big, broad thought, but then I think it literally is. I like the way you positioned it. It's hundreds of thousands of tiny decisions and baby steps
Hmm.
that got me from like endless expeditions to commercial advertising work. And
Yeah.
they're just super like tiny subconscious decisions. It's, you have 30 minutes, and are you going to call the equipment manufacturer to pitch them on another photo shoot, or are you going to court this person that you met at the airport that works for company X, but they liked what you had to say and you're trying to set up a meeting? And it's like time investment. Like, where are you going to put your time? And I think it was tons and tons of little. I mean, here's a great example. I think over my career, there were, certainly in the last 15 years, for the first 20 years, it was super straightforward. I'm going to leave town every free moment that I have to go climbing or photograph climbing or skiing or, kayaking. And then there was this moment, and it happened around the time that we had Layla, which was, some weekends I'm not going to leave town. And in fact, folks are going to come into town to visit that, like, they're fascinating, incredible humans, but they're going to lead to work, and I'm going to hang out with them. Like, I'm not going to go climbing. I'm going to go and walk on the beach or go for a hike and like talk about career and like and the company they work for. Those were huge. Those are huge. It's a small decision, right? I'm giving up a day of climbing, but I
Mm,
was, closing that door,
yeah.
opening the door, because that person that I'm spending time with is fascinating and a decision maker at some company that actually has much bigger budgets than, Black Diamond.
Hmm.
And neither is right or wrong, but it's kind of, that's how you get from, the you're on an expedition every other month to, you're doing a 1 week trip every other month that is still super stimulating with great people and you're telling great stories, but then the ability to be with your friends and family when you're at home. And
I mean,
so,
that's the business creative side of being a creator, is evolving and shifting and changing. And that's where longevity comes from. When people are
yeah,
like, what are you most proud of in your career? What one thing? And I'm like, that it's been that I'm
yeah,
still here. I'm still
mhm,
working in the industry that I chose to work in.
that's
And
right.
you're the same. It's required massive evolution every time, and hard
Yeah,
ones. I love it what you talked about, when you, the sort of hard, when you're really stuck with a decision, that you go walk for 3 hours outside, because and think about it, because a lot of people, when they're really stressed at work, they're really busy, me included, they're like, I don't have time to go outside, I
yeah,
don't have time to do that. But you actually use that as the space to figure out the problem. You're not escaping the problem by going and riding your bike. And that's where
yeah,
people don't prioritize going outside. and hopefully people
I see what
listening,
you're saying. Yeah.
you shape your time outside into productive thinking time and problem solving time, because we've all experienced this. We have these creative ideas when we're outside in nature, and then you're like, I'm going to forget it when I get back to my desk. This happened when I was writing my book. I couldn't think of anything while I was sitting in the computer. I'd go outside and I would start thinking. But you're using that process, yeah, to go outside for 3 hours when you're stuck with a really big business decision and you're overly worked and you're busy. That's pretty unique, Corey, to take those things and put them together and come home with a solution instead of it being an escape from the solution. It's
Yeah.
part of the solution.
I don't know if you, I mean, you and I, Reba, we've had many phone calls when either you're on a bike or I'm on a bike or walking. And I'll even take it like one step further. I'll oftentimes try to like do phone calls where I don't need to be like on Zoom
Yeah,
while walking, you know. So just the other day I saw my Strava pop up and I like literally walked in our neighborhood in like a circle. I mean, there's nothing special. I was just walking in a circle, but I was outside for like 7.5 miles while I was on the phone.
I love that.
And I think I was a better contributor to the phone call, and but still that like magic of being outside was happening subconsciously,
Right.
even behind the like face, like the surface level conversation of the phone call. I found I was better on the phone and I was having these like more profound thoughts kind of outside of the phone call
Yeah.
because I was moving. And so obviously I'm a huge advocate for like moving and talking. I even find with my daughter and my wife, we have better conversation if we're both like facing the same direction and moving forward. Sometimes that's in a car, sometimes that's on bikes, sometimes that's like side by side or even one behind the other. But there's something about like movement, and I would say the other layer is being outside that
Yeah.
just like I think it's science. It's just there's blood flow and your brain
I,
is
yeah, I'm sure Gervais could also tell us, he's a sports psychologist or psychologist, of like walking next to each other and not being
yeah,
face to face. I also think there is a like there's something that's happening in the brain that's different than
yeah,
seeing and staring into someone's eyes. So I'll check into that and find that out. It's making me think, because have had this idea. I want to take What's the Rush podcast outside and do some outside episodes.
yeah,
You're definitely inspiring me to make that happen, but I'm going to have to learn some sound and film techniques from you maybe to make that happen.
yeah. That's a hard one. That's you need a breathless day, a windless day to make
Yeah.
that work.
So I want to ask you, you've said multiple times you've never written a business plan for your business, even though it's wildly successful and amazing. Do you have, like, for yourself personally, like a mission statement or a vision statement for you and your life, not for Corey Rich,
Yeah, yeah.
the business?
Well, and I'll say, you know, I truly haven't written a business plan, but of course I spend a lot of time thinking about like, should we do this or should we do this?
Right.
Like, what's the,
Yeah,
I
I don't
mean,
want to make it sound like you're
yeah,
like definitely doing your business
yeah,
without any plan,
yeah,
because I know that's not the
yeah.
case. But you haven't like written this 10-year, 20-year.
No, no,
Yeah, nor have
no.
I.
I mean, but I've always had this philosophy, and I'm, you know, it's something that I pass along when people ask for advice, which is, you know, it's sort of what has the model been? And the model is like, I think it's pretty simple, which is work really fucking hard. I mean, that one is, I feel like that has been kind of key to like making this career work, which is, you know, I think there are plenty of people that are more talented, but I'm like all outwork them. And because I enjoy it, like I actually enjoy the work.
Yeah,
It's like, you know, you work super hard, and it's, you know, this other piece, which is just be easy to work with. Like, and that's something that I talk to our staff about a lot. You know, it's this idea that it's so easy. We can complain about, look, everything. You can complain about virtually anything. You can
yeah,
find a reason why that's a problem or this person's a problem. But it's, you know, people want to work with people that are easy to get along with and have a positive attitude and produce the goods
yeah,
and don't complain. And so, you know, that if I were to there's the business plan.
yeah.
Um, And I think, you know, the Corey Rich, you know, mission statement, like me as a person, you know, it's continued to evolve because there's just, you know, I have two women in my life that are super important to me. But it's, you know, really the plan is like surround yourself by incredible people
Mm.
and try to savor the moments and do meaningful stuff with your time. And it's, you know, I know I'm oversimplifying it, but that, like, I love being around friends and family. I'm inspired by friends and family. You know, I love being with people that I feel real and true engagement with. And, you know, and I think one of the greatest gifts that I did not expect in life, Reba, I just had no idea how fulfilling having a little girl was going to be. It is like really, there's almost like there were all of these rad adventures in my career and in the adventure world, and now there's this new adventure with this incredible human being that you know, I'm her dad, and I get to like show her the ways and like at least expose her to what I know, and then
Yeah.
she's going to make her own decisions in life around what she wants to do.
Yeah, the ultimate gift for all of us, whether you're a biological parent or
Yeah,
an aunt or anything, is passing along and
yeah,
taking young people along for the next adventure. Because I
yeah,
think same as you, the people that were so influential and critical in my young years, they shaped my life.
yeah,
And the fact that you can help do that for somebody else by getting them outside, getting them to play, showing them, it's pretty cool. And you're such an awesome dad, and Marina's such an awesome mom, and yeah, your family's amazing. But I think about when you say this is like it's nothing new. It goes back to your dirtbag climbing days of wanting to hang out with cool people in cool places, and
yeah.
you're still doing that because it's part of who you are.
It's a funny thing. I mean, I'm like so thankful for this, but you know, we all design our lives. Like we choose where we're going to live and who we're going to hang out with, and you know, the life that we've shown Layla, you know, storytelling is really important in our lives. We spend a lot of time sitting with our friends around campfires or at someone's kitchen island telling stories, like doing what you and I are doing.
Yeah.
And it's Layla doesn't know any different. Like
Mhm.
she just has no idea that like that's not what everyone does all the
Yeah.
time. And
So cool.
I mean, it's like not a week goes by where we don't, where, you know, several nights during the week, we're sitting around with friends telling stories. And now I'm seeing her, she participates, like she's starting to create her own stories,
That's
you know,
cool.
where she used to always say, you know, papai, that's Portuguese for dad, you know, when she just wanted to be entertained, tell me some stories. And I would just serve up story after story. And then she would ask for the, but now we'll sit around at a table and she doesn't turn to me and say, Papai, can you tell that story about blah, blah, blah. She'll tell her own story. Like, you know, it's
Oh,
rotating. And that is like, it's as magical as it gets, Reba. And then
it's so good.
creating those stories together. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like one of the great gifts. Yeah.
I want to, as we wrap up, you're also like it's really cool what you've really embraced yourself in the South Lake Tahoe community, and you're actually building adventure and parks and experiences for other young people in the area. I just want to touch on that, what you're doing in your home community, because I think of all of us, we feel like, oh, I'm not Rebecca Rusch, I'm not Corey Rich, like I can't make this huge impact, but I see what you do. There's so much impact we can make with our family or our close community or the community where we live. And so I'd love for you to kind of share some of the examples of what you've done at home.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sitting in our office. Our production company is called Novus Select, and we have an office on Ski Run Boulevard. And Chris McNamara and I, one of my very best friends, Chris and I bought this
Also a
building.
legend, climbing
Yeah,
legend.
cli- climbing legend. Although he's retired from climbing, and now all he cares about is building trails. So
Yeah.
you need to
Yes.
get him on here to talk about trail building. And
I think we will.
um, but anyhow, we ended up on Ski Run Boulevard in South Lake, and we quickly realized it's a really special stretch of road. It's the shortest stretch of road from the mountains to the lake in south, a continuous stretch of road. But it's just off the main drag. It has the potential to be the true downtown for South Lake Tahoe. And there's a lot of affordable housing, workforce housing in and around the neighborhood. Definitely one of the lower income neighborhoods. And there was a vacant lot just up the street that was owned by Albertsons Corporation, Safeway and Albertsons, the grocery stores. And for years, as we got more involved with Ski Run Boulevard, we learned that for years, folks that cared about the street had been asking Safeway Corporation or Albertsons Corporation to donate the lot so that they could build a community park. And they never got a response from Albertsons, just zero response. And it's a vacant lot that cannot be developed. That was the deal. They stripped the coverage off to build a big grocery store in town. And one night during COVID, Chris and his wife and Marina and I and Win, another dear friend of mine, and his wife, and Lincoln and Belina, we all decided, what if we just try to buy the lot? And we, infused by whiskey and lots of time together, we called our good friend Renee Breck, a realtor, and she took the challenge. And like the next week, she got in contact with Albertsons and just said, we want to buy this lot from you. Of course, this is a massive corporation with thousands of stores. I don't think they even realized they owned a lot in South Lake Tahoe. And needless to say, they bid, and we ended up, the four couples, is at market value, which wasn't a ton of money, because it was unbuildable. But we bought the lot, and all of a sudden we realized, wait, now we have to actually put our money and time where our mouth is, which is build a community park. And so we had this incredible experience of fundraising close to like $800,000 from the community to build a park in a community where it's maybe most needed. We had a stretch goal, which was to build an artificial boulder, so an outdoor boulder like Snow King in Wyoming, right at the base in Jackson Hole, is a great example of these outdoor man-made boulders. And we met our goal. We learned a ton in the process. Couldn't have done it without a bunch of community help, both time and money. And just in the fall of 2024, we finished it and donated the park to the city of South Lake Tahoe. And now it's like 2 blocks away. And literally, I'm staring at my calendar thinking I've got to make a bunch of phone calls, but I think I can go down and boulder on the boulder while talking on the phone this afternoon.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful. We go down there and there's all kinds of families and grandmas and kids and brothers and sisters playing on the rope structures, and in a part of the community where there was no park within like a 2-mile radius. And now there's this community place to play, which is not only was it a great experience for Marina and I, but it was also just this amazing opportunity for the community to come together and turn the park into a reality. It turns out when folks are provided something that feels good and is good for the community, people will bend over backwards to make it happen. And yeah, lots of folks that played a key role in making the park a reality, but it was certainly a highlight of late was turning it into a reality.
I mean, it's such a great example of your whole career. Like, it hasn't been about you ever. It's been about showing people beautiful images or making, it's been about everyone else. It hasn't been about you feeding your ego. And
Yeah.
this is just another example of that.
Yeah. No, it turns out, and this is just old wisdom, that it's when you help people, you help yourself as much as you help them.
Yeah.
And, I think the park definitely felt that way. It's it'll last a long, the amount of joy that I get walking down the street and seeing people enjoying that park it's priceless. It's worth every hour and every dollar that we put into it.
It's really cool. I have a part of my value statements. Give equals get is one of them, of like, putting on an event or seeing people cross the finish line of Private Idaho with like, they rode 100 miles. Like, I get tearful, like more than if I finished and won a race, providing help helping other people have an experience.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yeah.
powerful.
It's really fulfilling. Yeah.
I have one last question for you because the name of this podcast is What's the Rush? And it was sort of prompted from me slowing down and removing things from my plate. So I'm wondering currently, right now, is there something that you are trying to remove, shed, slow down? Are you working on
Hmm.
something like that right now?
There is, yeah, I'm just deciding where to go with that. I'm always making decisions, Reba, about like how much time I have and like am I overcommitting or not, committing enough time. And this just more an exciting one. It's just kind of fun. Um, Chris McNamara and a group of us, we just love this community so much. Like we love Southlake and our friends and I can't seem to find enough time to hang out with friends. Like I just need an extra 8 hours a night to hang out and go for bike rides and climb and on a whim, and that's how the best things happen is you do it with your friends. They talk you into it and
Mhm.
you get lured in or suckered into it. And, part of the attraction to South Lake Tahoe is, we're kind of the scrappiest. We're one of the scrappier mountain towns.
Mhm.
It wasn't planned very well. The joke is we're called the dirty South of Tahoe. And I love that. I
I
love that
love it.
I love it.
I-
Like, yeah, we're not as polished and like it bothers some people. I love it. But there's a lot of really like incredible small mountain towns in and around South Lake Tahoe. And uh, a group of us just on a whim committed to buying a little restaurant and bar in Markleyville called the Cutthroat Tavern.
Yes.
And it's, look, if you ask me or if I ask myself, wait, was this like a good financial investment? The answer is absolutely not. Like terrible financial decision. Was this a good lifestyle decision that will achieve that other goal, which is creating more time to be near friends and community? 100%. Like that's what it achieves. And so, um, I guess in a roundabout, your question is like your question was, am I cutting anything or slowing down? And it's really by becoming a partner in this little bar and tavern with a bunch of friends. I'm creating more space to
Yeah.
spend time with our community and create yet another community gathering spot that honors sort of the history of the Sierra Nevada.
Yeah.
And that I'm excited about. But what that will do is it's going to cut into time elsewhere, but in a great way.
Means you're gonna stay there, yeah, and you're creating culture. And I mean, it makes me think about when you made your shift in your business when Layla was born. You didn't necessarily cut anything out, but you shifted the
Yeah, that's right.
choices. So this feels like another one of those moments.
Yeah, I think so. I think it'll be a shift. And yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to when you and Greg come through town, elbow up to the
Let's
Cutthroat
go.
Tavern
It's
Saloon
open.
Bar.
Yeah. Maybe I'll do a bike ride that like ends there or it has to stop there or something.
Yeah. Well, I think you need to talk to Chris McNamara about that. He should be one of your guests, and he can outline the trail that you're going to ride to get to the Cutthroat Tavern.
He's doing some amazing work that I'll share with everyone on so many trails across the world, really, country, and connecting the dots for people to get outside. So, but for you, Corey, thank you so much for being here. I know this conversation is gonna kind of help people make some of their choices and how they're shifting their career or what they choose to do every day, that is valuable to them. So I really appreciate the time, and I do look forward to maybe another adventure with you and
Yeah,
maybe
I know.
Layla, maybe all three of us.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Well, Reba, it was so great to catch up, and thank you for having me.
It's a long and dusty road and a hot and heavy load. Folks I meet ain't always kind. Some are bad, some are good, some have done the best they could. Some have tried to ease my troubling mind. And I can't help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound.